Welcome to the World of Horror minisode. This is the cute and dorky cousin of the World of Horror podcast, where we talk vintage and vintage-ish movies in our Midwestern accents. I'm Christina.
And I'm Quinn.
And it's our mission to make connections to the main movie from last week. Last week, Mac and I covered the 2003 Japanese supernatural tech horror flick, One Missed Call, and the 2008 abysmal American remake. At the end of the film, there is a dream sequence, so that is one of the things we will look at today. In the American remake of One Missed Call, the Dutch angle was liberally used, and so we will look at films that use this technique well. Hi, Quinn. How's it going?
Hi, Christina. It's going well. We are on day one of spring break.
Woo!
So that's really nice. We've got a 10-day weather forecast that includes sun and like 60s weather and, a lot of pollen, but you take the good, you take the bad, you take them both, and there you have the facts of life.
Or the weather in North Carolina during spring break.
Yeah. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well, too. I'm so excited because during this whole COVID time, when I wake up in the morning, the first thing I say is, what day is it? Because sometimes they run together and like every day is like a Saturday or every day is like a Monday. But I was like, it's Monday, but it's the Monday of spring break. So I got to put my little away message on my email and I'm clocked out for the whole week and I can do whatever I want. I'm very excited.
Very nice. I'm going to be grading here and there, but I'm also going to be like taking off too. But yeah, that's funny. Every time I wake up, I feel like there should be a sign that says, your name is Quinn. It's Monday. You're on day 368 of pandemic or something to remind me, because sometimes I don't know what to think when I wake up.
Yeah, but our time is coming to a close, it seems, if the CDC is to be trusted, because as soon as we're both fully vaccinated at the end of this month, we can hang out in person.
Yay!
Without masks, inside.
It's a dream.
Crazy. I really had a bleak outlook. Like, even this time last month, I'm like, we're never going to get the vaccine. It's going to be late summer, but it's looking good now.
Yeah, things are looking up. Like, we deserve a little bit of hope, and it's going a long way. And with this weather and this little break and just taking a deep breath and being grateful for stuff, this is good.
Very good. Well, should we move on to our first segment, Quinn?
Yeah, let's do it.
It's time for our first segment. This isn't a dream. This is really happening.
That was such a good Rosemary's Baby reference.
Yeah, well, enjoy it because I don't have one for the next segment. But for this segment, you picked Pee-wee's Big Adventure from 1985, and I picked An American Werewolf in London from 1981. Would you like to talk about Pee-wee's Big Adventure?
Yeah, I would like to talk to you for the next 7 hours about Pee-wee's Big Adventure. So when the thought of doing this and looking at dream sequences came up, I got super stoked because, well, admittedly, Rosemary's Baby is my feel-good movie, which says a lot about me.
Mm-hmm.
But it also, I think, choosing Pee-wee's Big Adventure to look at for this dream sequence section says a lot about Pee-wee's Big Adventure. So yeah, the obvious choice for me, Rosemary's Baby, but I won't go there. I'm going to go to the nostalgic and beautiful Pee-wee's Big Adventure. So it's a 1985 film directed by Tim Burton. It's his first theatrical full-length film, which is really cool and very, very important. Of course, this is starring Pee-wee, Paul Reubens, who also wrote it along with Phil Hartman and Michael Vorhall. And of course, Paul Reubens is Pee-wee. And this is, it's kind of like it becomes a road trip movie in that they're looking for Pee-wee has lost his prized possession, his bicycle. And so the whole film sort of it's propelled by this need to find the bike. And it's so weird and it's so surreal, and at times it's like unimaginably horrific with the score and the imagery. And it is, I think, initially it's like for kids, because Pee-wee's Playhouse was for kids, but adults loved it too. But this one is just it is it is like a surrealistic nightmare in the best way possible.
Mhm.
And there's actually 3 dream sequences in this film. So the film opens up with a dream sequence where Pee-wee and his beloved bike are racing in the Tour de France. And he wins. He comes in first, and right as he's being awarded the medal, his alarm starts to go off, and then like everybody in the dream starts running away, and he wakes up and he starts to go about his day, and gets his bike out, goes into town, and all that good stuff. Okay, the second dream sequence is after he sort of like they're all little like kind of mini stories of him interacting with people. But the second one comes after he is at the diner and realizes he doesn't have his wallet, so he does the dishes in payment for his meal, his tuna fish, which is what I would have ordered too. And he has a dream sequence or a nightmare sequence later that night, because this diner is around a dinosaur like park or something, or like attraction. So he has a nightmare that this dinosaur is eating his bike, because he still hasn't found it at this point. And then the third dream sequence comes not too far after that, about an hour and 5 into the film, and he is in the hospital, and he has a nightmare about a clown hospital where they're all like running around in clown makeup and nurse costumes, and they have his bike and they're taking it apart, and then Francis, his arch nemesis, who you meet in the beginning, is the devil in this nightmare sequence. And he lowers the bike into a volcano of sorts, and that's that. But as a kid, I loved this movie so much, and I don't know, like watching it now, I'm like, who are you, 9-year-old Quinn? But I loved it so much, and the thing I remember the most about this film is the clown hospital dream sequence.
Yeah.
And there's so many things I love about this movie, and like I quote this movie all the time, but imagery wise, that's what I go to.
Yeah, and I guess I'm thinking of the clown in the very, very beginning, who that's where he initially chained his bike next to this clown in real life. And so I guess it sort of like comes like full circle in a way. But those clowns are scary. I'm sorry. They are not happy, cheerful clowns.
Yeah, and like the worst thing is when the doctor rips off his mask and you just think he's like a normal guy, but he's a clown too, and he's like the scariest clown of all of them, because he looks like he was I don't know, he looks like he's lived a hard life. And to me, I don't want my clown to be living a hard life. I'd rather have him living a soft life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, so just like if I have time, a couple fun trivia, because like it's really hard to not just talk about this movie for 7 more hours. Another really memorable part of the movie is Large Marge. And in the trivia, it says that well, it's one of the most memorable scenes, it was almost cut. So Tim Burton says, I almost cut the best thing before an audience saw it. It was a special effect, and those are the first things to go. So IFC lists the scene as number 5 on their list of 25 scariest moments in non-horror movies.
Mm.
Yeah. Such a good scene. Still horrifying. Um, Another bit of trivia. So Jan Hooks she's a tour guide at the Alamo. She improvised all of her scenes. And let me tell you, that's like one of my favorite 5 minutes in movie history. I feel like I say that a lot, but I couldn't love her anymore. And I always wanted to be a tour guide when I was a little kid. And I realized this time watching, it was because of Jan Hooks.
Oh, wow.
There's no other reason. Um, okay, so another piece of trivia is when Pee-wee turns around while looking for his bike, when he realizes the bike is missing after he sees the clown with just like the chain shackles, there's a bunch of wheels spinning behind him, which is an homage to Hitchcock, which that's so cool.
Yeah, that's pretty great.
Yeah. And then the other like kind of cool reference is that it's a nod to Bicycle Thieves, so the 1948 film, in that the main character's prized bicycle is stolen, the police don't take the crime seriously, nor do his friends offer much help. As a last he consults a dubious fortune teller. So in Pee-wee's Big Adventure, she's just full of crap, and she comes up with this idea that it's in the basement of the Alamo, which doesn't exist, of course. So, yeah.
Awesome.
And I also love it, like where you just get a cut when he's talking to the police officer, and she's like, "So, what makes you think the Soviets are involved?" But she like don't hear anything else about that until the end when they've done like a remake of Pee-wee's Big Adventure, starring James Brolin. So, yeah.
And Morgan Fairchild.
And Morgan Fairchild, yes. And Pee-wee Herman.
It's a great movie. I really like it. I haven't seen it as many times as you have, but I find it really enjoyable. Now, the other day when I tried to watch it, I had to shut it off after about the first 5 minutes because there's just so much going on visually, and the music is chaotic. And I guess if you're not in just the right place, you might, not have a good time. But fortunately I was at home and I could shut it off and come back to it. But yeah, I like it. It's a great movie. It's so imaginative. It's so visually pleasing. And I love Pee-wee Herman as a character. I think he's super funny.
Yeah, I do. I do too. And I agree. Like when I started rewatching it the other day too, my TV wasn't louder than it ever normally is. But the first few minutes, I was like, I gotta get up. I gotta turn this down, because it was just like, it just felt so loud because of those things that you just mentioned, and everything like sort of fights each other, and it becomes this chaotic, sort of beautiful mess. And I love it, but I did have to turn it down a little bit.
Yeah, a beautiful mess. That's very apt, I think. All right, great choice, Quinn.
Thank you.
My pick is An American Werewolf in London, which came out just a couple months after Quinn was born. She was just a wee bairn. And American Werewolf in London was released. It was written and directed by John Landis. It stars David Naughton, Jenny Agutter, Griffin Dunn, and John Woodbine. And I'm not sure how to, it's a comedy, it's a horror comedy. And those are really hard to pull off. But there are comedic moments, and the horror is also real. And even though it was filmed in 1981, I think the special effects still hold up. Some of them look ridiculous, but some of them surprisingly, still work. So it's just the story of these two American college kids, and they're backpacking in England, and one of them gets killed by a werewolf and the other one is bitten. And so, of course, werewolves don't exist. Nobody believes them. He's in the hospital. And that's where the dream sequences kick in. So the first one, he's running through the woods, and it's at a wolf side view. So it's a really cool, trick. So it looks like, it's right at that level. One thing I forgot to mention about this movie that I had forgotten is um, almost immediately, like a fairy tale, somebody tells these two characters, stay off the moors. And he also says, beware the moon. So it's a full moon that night. So, of course, they accidentally end up on the moors, and that's how this all happens. The next dream that David has, he's running naked, and he sees a deer, and he attacks a deer in its neck, and just like it's pretty violent. The next one is he's still in the hospital. He's in the hospital for like a month or something, recovering from this. What he's told is a maniac attacked him, and he knows that his friend has died too. But he's like, no, a person didn't do this to me. It was like a dog or a wolf or werewolf or something. But nobody believes them. But so these nightmares just sort of ramp up in terms of their violence. The third one is a dream within a dream, which is pretty great. Oh no, that's the fourth one. Sorry. The third one is he's back like he was in the beginning. He's running in his backpack, and he sees himself in a hospital bed, and the beautiful nurse who becomes his love interest approaches him. But when he, the perspective shifts, he's a monster. And then he wakes up. The last one is my favorite. He's with his family at a table, like studying, and he's got a very much younger brother and sister, and they're like playing a board game on the floor. There's this relentless knocking at the door, and the dad goes and opens it, and there's this automatic weapon. These monsters are in these like helmets. I looked up the helmets. They're called Stuhlhelm. They're like from World War I. But anyway, and they're these hideous monsters, and they're shooting the whole family, and they kill the kids, and one of them slices David's neck, and then he wakes up, and his nurse friend is there, and she goes to the curtain to open up the curtain in the hospital room, and a monster in the helmet stabs her. So that's like a dream within a dream. So that one's pretty awesome and disgusting. But he's also visited by his dead friend. And so I didn't know if I should have, these aren't dreams really. And they're, whether or not you think this character is real or not, you might think of them as hallucinations. But when I first saw this as a kid, I just took it as his friend was actually visiting him, talking to him. And the friend, what's cool about this is there are 3 visits, and every time he's decaying more and more. So at first he's just sort of like bloody, and you can see the scratch marks, and then like his skin is hanging in like ribbons on his neck. The next time he's like green, and the next time he has no lips or like eyelids or anything, and he's like turning into a corpse. But he keeps telling his friend, kill yourself, because the bloodline has to end, and it has to end with you, because if you don't do this, you're going to attack people. And he does. He like kills like 6 people. But he doesn't want to believe that it's true. But anyway, I have a little bit of trivia on this. Rick Baker won the first Oscar for makeup artistry. So before that, it was not a category. So I thought that was really great. And the makeup is incredible. You can look up clips online if you haven't seen this movie, or just go ahead and watch the movie. It's real short. But the famous one is there's a picture of his hand expanding into the shape of, a wolf's hand. And I'm not sure how they did it, but it's super cool. His whole transformation is really great. And then the monster makeups of the creatures in his dream are also really, really great.
That's so cool. I had no idea that it didn't start until like 82, that this category wasn't a thing. And that's like, I'm so fascinated to know what, provoked what provokes new categories as they come. That's so cool.
Yeah.
That.
And just another little bit about the makeup. Michael Jackson loved this movie, and he called Landis and he told him he was a big fan and he really liked Rick Baker's work. And in 1983, Landis, I didn't know this, Landis directed Michael Jackson's Thriller music video, which makes a lot of sense. If you look at American Werewolf and then you look at the Thriller video, Baker was in charge of the makeup on that one and the effects and everything. And Landis said his only, quote, marching orders from Jackson were, "I want to turn into a monster."
That's so cool.
Yeah, I think it's so neat. I highly recommend this movie. I just think it's, like I said, it is a pretty good mesh of comedy and horror. And, for such an old movie, it really holds up.
Yeah, especially, I mean, what you said about the makeup and everything and the transformations, because that really can, that can like just teeter the line of silly, even though this pieces of comedy are within here, but I think you can take it more seriously when it's more realistic, which it's hard to do. I imagine when you're dealing with a from a human to a werewolf.
There was a show, and I was trying to think of the name of the show, and you might have watched it too, Quinn, or I know they made an American version, but it's basically a werewolf, a vampire, and a something become friends, like in the real world. And it's that guy, one of the guys from Years and Years, I don't know that actor's name, but he's the werewolf. And when he transforms, it reminded me a lot of the sequence in American Werewolf in London. In that it's so painful, and sometimes that's not depicted like that, but of course it would be incredibly painful, all your bones stretching and breaking and your face expanding and all this. So yeah, good stuff. I liked it.
Yeah, so like last week when we were talking about vampires, I had rewatched What We Do in the Shadows, and the werewolves in that. There's this part, where one of like a newbie is wearing skinny jeans, kind of, and they're like, "You just don't get it. You're gonna lose it. You're gonna lose those pants. Like they're gone. Say goodbye to them." And it just, that doesn't speak to what you just mentioned, like the horror of and the pain of your bones and everything, but. He lost those pants, so.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and there is a scene where David, the character, wakes up in a wolf enclosure at the zoo. Oof. And if IMDb is to be believed, that he was in that enclosure with those wolves. Naked.
Oh, wow.
And the wolf, what do they call them? Wranglers. The wolf wranglers were women. And he was like, "Hey, could we get some men over here? I'm naked." But yeah, so a little knot and butt in the movie. Well, let's move on to our next segment. What is a Dutch angle?
Well, I'll take it from here, Christina. All right. So yeah, we noted in the American version of One Missed Call that it just becomes one big Dutch angle. And a Dutch angle, could be called many things. So canted angle, oblique angle shots, I guess German angles as well, Batman angles sometimes. But what it is, it's a shot, and the camera is shot with a tilt on the camera's roll axis. So the point of this is a tilted perspective, and it makes viewers feel uneasy. So using a Dutch angle shot signals that something is wrong. Something is unsettled. It's disorienting. It just feels wrong, chaotic in some way. So something cool about this that I didn't know, and I really like Dutch angles, and I love when I see them, because I only will notice them if they're done subtly, in a subtle manner. And that's when I love them, because you can't make a whole movie with Dutch angles because you lose everything.
Yeah.
No longer is it a subtle hint to the chaos that is occurring. It's like, okay, it's just like in your face in a gross way. But this is cool. I didn't know why they were called Dutch angles. I understand canted and whatnot, but it just didn't hit me. But it comes from, it was pioneered during German Expressionism.
Yay.
Yay, we're going to weave it all back in. So it started on the cabinet of Dr. Caligari, and the DP inspired other expressionist directors like Murnau and Fritz Lang, and they started using these angles more. It worked so well because they were attempting to achieve this imbalance in the composition. So, they could do it with the mise-en-scène, they could do it with like the setting and the lines and everything, but they could also do it by tilting the camera and achieving this sort of just uneasy feeling, because when you're doing it with the composition and you're also doing it with the cinematography and you're doing it with maybe the music as well, like then you're really doing it, and that's when a film becomes powerful. But if you just like shove a bunch of canted angles in someone's face, it's just gross. But so it started in German Expressionism, and it was actually, they think that it became Dutch angles because it was Deutsch angles. So it doesn't really have anything to do with the Dutch, but it does have everything to do with German Expressionism. And then like throughout the 30s, 40s, and 50s, Hollywood directors caught wind of it and started utilizing it. So Orson Welles used it a lot in Citizen Kane. Hitchcock uses it a lot in many of his films, John Huston. And then people use it now, of course, all the time in suspense and thriller and all that good stuff. And then some people just use it throughout their whole movie. No, I actually have never seen something like that where it was just totally a canted angle. And so when I talk about angles in class, I always use this example. When I was a kid, we had a pug named Jake. And he would just sit there and you could ask him questions, and just the idea that your voice was going up because it was a question, like, Jake, do you want to have food? He would just tilt his head back and forth. And so whenever I think of canted angles too, I think of that because I know Jake did not understand what we were saying. So there's confusion and chaos.
That's great. I like it. So maybe we should adopt that parlance and call it a Jake angle.
We could, because there's so many different names, but I think it's most fun to use Dutch angle.
Yeah, I think too.
Because there's like mystery there.
Yeah, I don't know. And Dutch is just a fun word to say.
I think so too. Yeah. So I decided to revisit The Third Man, which is a 1949 film by Carol Reed. And if you haven't seen this, it's so worth your time to invest in it. There's so many cool things happening, but just a very tiny taken from IMDb plot summary because I'm not good at these. So the premise is pulp novelist Holly Martins travels to shadowy post-war Vienna, only to find himself investigating the mysterious death of an old friend, Harry Lime. So this film is so fun because you have Joseph Cotten and Orson Welles reunited. And of course, this isn't an Orson Welles film. This was directed by Carol Reed. And Orson Welles is in it for a very small, manner of minutes, really. But you do see them reunited, and that feels so good after Citizen Kane, I think, as a fan of them. And I just adore Joseph Cotten. And I feel like anytime I watch him, it's just a joy because I think he's great. And I think he's under, I don't know, like he's what's the word I'm looking for?
Underrated?
Underrated. Yes, that's totally the word. All right. So the thing about The Third Man is that Carol Reed does use Dutch angles a lot because the whole film is really so much a suspense film. We're trying to get to the root of an issue and also the root of a person. And again, we think from the beginning that Harry Lime is dead, but he shows up. So most of the film takes place in like the shadowy alleyways and tunnels of Vienna. So again, post-war Vienna, shady place. There were a lot of like deals going on. The city was, still in shambles. So it's kind of a dark and shadowy place anyways. So to set a film like this there, it's so much like peeking around a corner in these, long shadows and low angles and Dutch angles because everything is unknown. He doesn't know what he got himself into. He got himself into something much bigger than he was planning. So this film rocks. If you haven't seen it, you gotta go. You gotta watch it. A couple pieces of trivia. I like this one. Graham Greene. This was his only original screenplay. So during the shooting of the film, the final scene was the subject of a dispute between him, who wanted a happy ending, like the novella, and Carol Reed and David O. Selznick, who stubbornly refused to end the film on what they felt was an artificially happy note. Graham Greene later wrote, one of the very few major disputes between Carol Reed and myself concerned the ending, and he has been proved triumphantly right. And that is cool because if you watch the ending, it is a long take of Anna walking away from Holly. And if your heart wants things to end nicely tied up in a bow, you want her to stop and say something to him, but she does not. She just walks by, and it is an uncomfortable minute and a half. But it works so well. Another piece of trivia is that Jack White loves this movie, and he named his record label Third Man Records. And you can go visit Third Man Records in Detroit. And I have a couple of times, and it's really cool to see a recording studio. And they also have a mold-orama there, or two, I think, where you put in $1 and it will create you a mold of something.
Oh, yeah, I remember those.
Yeah, I love those. And like they're hard to find. They have two of them at Third Man Records.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, at the zoo in my hometown, Henry Violet Zoo in Madison, Wisconsin. I don't know I doubt if they're still there, but that was the deal when I was a kid. I don't know, it was like 25 cents or something at that time to make these, and you could just watch the process, and you could, have a lion at the end, or an elephant or something. So yeah, those are cool.
I know, and I can smell them. Like
yeah.
thinking about it, I just want to smell them so badly, but I can smell it because it's such a distinct smell. And there's people I think that specialize in restoring those machines.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't think that they've made new ones, but they've kept a lot of the old ones in good shape. So I bet you there still is one at your zoo. There's one at the Detroit Zoo too, and there's like 6 of them at the Henry Ford Museum in Detroit.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's a mecca of moldoramas. Yeah, so
similar to those like squashed pennies that you can get in souvenir shops, or quarters, or squashed pennies, I guess.
Yeah, those are so cool too.
Yeah.
I wanted to like go on a road trip a few years ago and find all the moldoramas because there's a website that shows you where they all are. Most of them I think are in the Midwest. And And there's a handful in Florida, and I think quite a few in California too.
Well, we
But
should totally do that after this pandemic is done.
yeah, we should just at least find the closest one here.
Yeah.
And the other thing we should do is that Vienna now, they and for years they've done the Third Man tours. So
Oh,
you can
cool.
go to all of the places that the characters go to. And I have always wanted to do that because this film, Vienna is, post-war Vienna is like the main character in this film, really.
Mhm.
Because it sort of means so much. And I've always wanted to go on one of those tours. And they do have, I think that they have, I mean, maybe like in the height of tourist season, but they had zither players, which is the instrument that is used in the score for this, that people, when they heard it, it just blew their minds because it just doesn't sound like anything else.
Hmm.
It's got such a unique sound. Yeah.
Cool. Speaking of tours, I looked up in my vast research on An American Werewolf in London. There is a video on YouTube that shows the scene from the movie and then the actual place in Wales or wherever they were filming. And so that's kind of cool, if you want to visit it virtually.
Yeah. Yeah. We all have Wonderlist right now. I have like a list of things now I have to do just from this episode.
Well, my pick was 12 Monkeys from 1995. It was directed by Terry Gilliam, and the screenplay was by David and Janet Peoples. It was based on La Jetée by Chris Marker. And that's a cool little film that I think you can also find on YouTube. I'm going to say it's like 20 minutes, but I could be totally mistaken. It could be like 12. But anyway, it's short and it's very cool. The cast is Bruce Willis, Madeline Stowe, Brad Pitt, and Christopher Plummer. And I was trying to think how to summarize this because it is a time travel movie. Bruce Willis makes 4 trips in the course of the movie. But what has happened in 1996 is a virus has wiped out most of the population on Earth. And so what has happened is animals have taken over the Earth and people have retreated underground. And Bruce Willis is being sent back into the past to try to find the virus and bring it back so they can find a cure. And then, I don't know, I guess reverse the pandemic in that movie. What I really like about it is this part where when Bruce Willis shows up in 1996, people, of course, think he's a lunatic when he's talking about, everyone's dead, and that he's from the future and all this stuff. And he's placed in a mental institution. Now, what happens is a psychiatrist takes an interest in him, Madeline Stowe, and she thinks he's nuts, but she wants to try to, figure out how to help him. And through the course of his trips back and forth, she realizes that he's telling the truth, but he starts to think that maybe he is insane. So they kind of do this crisscross of like, what is reality? What's really going on here? And I just love that almost at the same point, they're like, no, you are a time traveler. No, I am insane, So I just thought that was a really cool thing. There are lots of candid angles in this movie. One of my favorites is when Brad Pitt plays another man who's institutionalized, and he's showing Bruce Willis around the game room. And it does kind of rock back and forth almost. The camera is kind of going back and forth. And at this point, Bruce Willis's character has been highly sedated, and he's totally confused and turned around and everything. But when the psychiatrist learns that something that Bruce Willis said is actually true in her reality, then it does it actually to her too. So the canted angles don't just apply to Bruce Willis's situation; they also apply to the psychiatrist situation too. So I like that a lot, and it was done very well. I mean, there's low angles, high angles. There's all kinds of stuff going on in this movie because it's Terry Gilliam, and that's sort of his jam. I rewatched Time Bandits, which is also a Terry Gilliam movie, and I didn't count or anything, but there were far less in Time Bandits. But for example, when Evil is walking up the stairs and it looks like, our heroes are doomed, there's a pretty severe cant. But I love 12 Monkeys. I think it's really great. It's incredibly depressing if you really figure out what's going on. But one thing also, fun fact that I like about this movie is Cole as a little boy, the shape and color of his eyes are the same as my eldest son Sam when he was that age. So That's really cool. I like seeing that little kid. But anyway. So here's some trivia. A tagline originally suggested, I like this. A tagline originally suggested for this film was, "The future is in the hands of a man who has none." But that was considered to be confusing because it made it sound as though he has no hands as opposed to having no future.
Oh my
that would have been a very different movie.
Yes. So wow, that's funny.
There were lots of different people considered for the role. Gilliam's choice was Jeff Bridges, who he had just worked with on The Fisher King 4 years earlier. Also a really great movie. Lots of cants in that one too, because Robin Williams in that one escapes to a different reality because his own is so painful that he can't process it. But the studio wanted a bigger star, and so he cast Bruce Willis. Ironically, Willis had originally auditioned for The Fisher King, but lost out to Bridges. I think it's perfect the way it worked out. I can't imagine them in each other's roles, but
yeah, I certainly can't imagine Willis in The Fisher King for some reason. I can't do it.
Yeah, that's tough. Yeah. I mean, I have a love-hate relationship with Bruce Willis. I think he takes direction well. I think, obviously, because he does a good job with the character in this movie. And Gilliam did say that there were some cliche Willisisms that he didn't want, like the steely gaze and stuff like that. So I think he can take direction well, or he could back in 95. But I don't think he's a great actor generally. He's great in this role, though. So, and he's a really fun character.
That was the first time we saw like that really crazy side of Brad Pitt too.
Yes. And
the first time.
He was nominated for I think Best Actor, Oscar, and Golden Globe. I don't know if he won them, but I think he was really sort of, getting on the map at this point in the 90s. Okay, you're gonna like this one, Quinn. In the 24-hour Hitchcock theater, Catherine and James are watching Vertigo. She transforms herself with a blonde wig, and James sees her emerge within a red light. This mirrors a scene from that movie. The same Bernard Herrmann score can be heard, and Catherine wears the same coat that Kim Novak wears in the first part of Vertigo.
Oh my gosh, I love it. That's so cool. I wonder.
It always comes back to Hitchcock.
I know, it really does. Like it does. I gotta read more about Terry Gilliam and Hitchcock now.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, he's sort of like, I don't know, like Guillermo del Toro or somebody who's like a huge scholar of films and can just like quote them, or Bong Joon-ho or something, just like quote them in the movies, and you're just like, ah, I see what you did there. But yeah, I mean, he's a master. I mean, he's not loved by everyone, and he had a lot of trouble with studios. He lost them a lot of money on a movie called The Tales of Baron Munchausen. I think it cost like 24 million and it made 8. So they were a little leery of giving him the reins again, but I think this movie's great. Great science fiction, great time travel. The characters are engaging. And so recommend.
Yeah, I want to go back to this one. I remember seeing it, maybe probably not when it came out, but maybe like some years later, and just thinking how crazy films can be. I mean, because I think for me, this was maybe one of the first that just got so layered in terms of like the plot and what was happening, and just like, I don't know, it's a very layered film, and it really does further a conversation, and that's so cool. And I think for me, this was one of the first that really felt like it was so out there and so complex, and then like really pushed an idea that you could talk about and have a, an argument about.
Yeah, and there's sometimes in my class I teach, well, in Stoic philosophy, there's this idea that you should just be in the moment and enjoy what's happening right now, and forget about all this other stuff, like all the stuff that has happened and will happen. And Bruce Willis does that a couple of times in this movie. There's one scene where he just sticks his head out a car window, like a dog. And he's just like, I love breathing this air. And he's just enjoying the moment. And there's another one where he walks into this little pond and he just starts splashing around in this pond. And it's a delight, because adults generally don't do that. But, we can do it privately. We don't have to make a show of it, but just to understand that this is where we are. We can enjoy this moment and, let the other stuff fall away. And it's kind of neat that that's sort of tucked in there into his character, especially a character that's like zooming through time. And that's messing with him, like mentally and physically too. So just to say, okay, I can't do much about what's going to happen. I'm going to do what I can, but for now, I'm going to just enjoy what's right in front of me.
Yeah, that's a good lesson, and one that, comes out of such a chaotic film too. That's cool to find.
Yeah. Thanks for talking with me today, Quinn. This was fun.
This was so much fun. Yeah. Thank you.
So next time on the main episode, Mac and I will be discussing Somos from Mexico and the remake We Are What We Are from the US. Thanks as always for your support, and get in touch with us via Twitter, Instagram, or email. Until then, we have no tagline.
Yay!
Yeah, that was a good one. I think that's going to be a winner.
Hey, WoHos. I wanted to follow up on a couple of things mentioned in the podcast. For one thing, Russell Tovey is the actor I was thinking of. He played a werewolf in a show called Being Human. I watched a season maybe, but he's a great guy. Look him up. He does good work. Brad Pitt, speaking of good work, won the Golden Globe in 1996 for Best Supporting Actor. La Jetée is 28 minutes long, and I think you can rent it on Prime Video. You'll probably be able to find it other places. And then I wanted to say thanks to Audacity, the whole Dumadia family, Alan Hyde, Cole Osborne, and Zoom. See you next time.